This is not a story about religion. It's not about the devil. Not really. It's about men who looked into the abyss and felt it look back, and liked what they saw. It's about crimes so twisted they wore the mask of ritual. Blood offered not to summon demons, but to become them. Words spoken in darkness, not for power, but for permission.
Chapter 1. The Influence of the Infernal, When Belief Breeds Blood. The Church of Satan was never built for killers. Its founder, Anton LaVey, wrote of indulgence over abstinence, of reason over superstition. To some, it was satire wrapped in shadows. To others, it was a declaration of war against morality itself. But ideas are wild things, and in the right or wrong hands, even a philosophy built on theater can become a blueprint for horror. In 1970, a man named James Mitchell was arrested after brutally attacking his parents. In his journal, found soaked in blood, he'd scrawled inverted crosses, references to Black Mass, and passages taken directly from the Satanic Bible. Mitchell claimed the attack was part of his initiation into darkness. Authorities dismissed it as drug-fueled psychosis, but the symbols, the ritual, the obsession, they remained. He wasn't alone. Across the country, young men and women drawn to LaVey's language, the defiance, the embrace of self above all, began twisting those words into something darker. Not philosophy, not ritual, but justification. One of the earliest cases to shock investigators came from Arizona in 1974, when 19-year-old Daniel LaRue murdered a classmate, carving an inverted pentagram into the wall above the body. No official tie to the church was ever found, but his room was filled with LaVeyan literature and crude ritual tools. He later told police, "I wanted to break the world's rules. I wanted to be like them, the ones who don't feel guilt." It wasn't the teachings that created monsters. It was the monsters who saw in those teachings a mirror, and that mirror kept reflecting. In Texas, a string of animal mutilations escalated into human violence. The perpetrator, only 17, was arrested in 1983 after a stabbing spree in a cemetery. In his notebook, diagrams of sacrificial altars, Latin phrases from grimoires, and symbols from both LaVey's works and older occult texts. He claimed the acts were done to open the gate. No gate opened. But something inside him had already been unhinged. Criminologists at the time were unsure what to make of this pattern. Was it copycat behavior, delusion, or was there something about the aesthetic, the tone of modern Satanism that drew the disturbed like moths to flame? The church itself denied all association. LaVey publicly mocked the crimes, calling the perpetrators losers, not Satanists. And yet they kept appearing, in the shadows, at the edges, in basements, in woods, in whispers. In the 1980s, a series of teenage suicides and group self-harm incidents were reported in small towns across the US. Parents found altars, black candles, goats' skulls, and, on occasion, the Satanic Bible, underlined and stained. Police rarely found proof of church membership, but the language, the imagery, and the ritualistic framing pointed to one thing: belief. Not in Satan as a deity, but in destruction as liberation. They believed that by rejecting the sacred, they could become untouchable. In many ways, that belief came not from LaVey himself, but from the reflection society cast upon his work. The media dubbed it ritual crime. The symbols meant for theater became warnings. A pentagram no longer meant parody. It meant danger. And the killers watched. They learned. Some even embraced the label, choosing Satanism not as a religion, but as a costume for carnage. They found in the Church of Satan a language that would terrify those who found their scenes, and terror, for them, was part of the act. In 1987, a rural sheriff described finding a murder scene in an abandoned barn. There were candles, drawings, blood, real blood. On the wall was written, "Hail Self, Hail Death." A copy of the Satanic Bible lay next to the body. Police never caught the killer, but what he left behind felt like a sermon. Psychologists began calling this ideological camouflage, the use of belief systems to justify or decorate violent behavior. In cases tied to satanic imagery, this camouflage was often a mix of borrowed philosophy, misinterpreted ritual, and raw psychological collapse. Some of these individuals truly believed they were serving some dark cause. Most just wanted to feel powerful. In the late 1980s, one psychiatrist treating a teen involved in a grave desecration case said, "He didn't believe in Satan, he believed in control, and Satanism gave him the mask to wear." The mask fit too well? In 1991, a quiet town in Montana became the epicenter of a murder-suicide so brutal, it was labeled a ritual execution. The killer, 22-year-old Mark Jansen, had surrounded his home with symbols, a black sun, alchemical signs, and handwritten quotes from LaVey, mixed with Nietzsche. He had murdered his partner and set the house on fire while chanting, according to neighbors. In his final note, he wrote, "I am the law. I am the flame. I leave the husks behind." None of it was coherent theology, but that didn't matter. It was performance, madness, and belief fused into something feral, and it kept spreading. In the early 90s, FBI profilers began noting the rise of what they called symbol-driven offenders. Individuals not acting under formal cults or groups, but drawing from dark iconography and belief systems to build their own mythology. Satanism was often part of the recipe, but not the cause, more like the amplifier. In one particularly disturbing case, a 16-year-old in Colorado was found guilty of stabbing his teacher to death. The walls of his bedroom were covered in black fabric. In the center of the floor, police found a drawn ritual circle and bloodied copies of obscure satanic zines. His friends told investigators he didn't care about religion. He just wanted to see what would happen. That phrase, "see what would happen," became a chilling pattern. The belief systems weren't leading. They were following, like a shadow. Because at the heart of these cases wasn't just the allure of power, it was transformation, a chance to shed their skin and become something else. The Church of Satan never preached murder, but some who read it heard permission. Chapter 2. Real killers, ritual crimes, blood on the altar. Not every killer left behind a trail of symbols, but when they did, the message was clear. Some believed they were messengers, others thought they were gods, and a few simply wanted the world to watch as they burned every boundary. These are the ones we remember. The Black Circle, Norway's church burnings, and ritual killings. In the early 1990s, Norway became ground zero for a strange hybrid of Satanism, black metal music, and violent crime. The so-called Black Circle, composed of musicians and fans of extreme metal, began a campaign of church burnings across the country. More than 50 historic churches were torched, often in the dead of night, with satanic symbols painted nearby. But it didn't stop at arson. In 1993, Oystein Aarseth, known as Euronymous, a leading figure in the scene, was murdered by fellow musician Varg Vikernes. Varg claimed it was in self-defense. Others said it was part of a deeper ideological split over who was the true servant of darkness. Both men had flirted with Satanism, paganism, and occultism. Varg often referenced LaVeyan texts in interviews, though twisted with nationalist and nihilistic rhetoric. For him, Satanism wasn't worship. It was war against Christianity. What began as music transformed into destruction. The flames were real. The doctrine of identity. When we look at these cases, spread across countries, decades, belief systems, the pattern isn't religion, it's identity. Satanism, especially in its LaVeyan form, was never meant to be worship. It was designed as rejection of conformity, guilt, and imposed morality. But for those on the edge, it became something else. A framework to dissolve empathy. A language to justify cruelty. A flag for the outcast, the vengeful, the hungry. Psychologists call it transgressive alignment. When someone fuses their sense of self with that which society deems forbidden, once that bond is complete, morality doesn't apply. Only performance does. And so, the altar becomes a stage. Some did it for power, others for chaos. A few, just to be remembered. Legacy in shadows. Today, many of these names have faded into myth, their crimes reduced to Wikipedia pages and true crime forums. But their impact lingers. Every time a pentagram is spray painted on a church, every time a teenager finds a dusty copy of the Satanic Bible and sees something more than satire, every time belief becomes a mask. The Church of Satan has always denied these men and their acts. It claims no blood, no shrines, no worship, just philosophy. But belief has a way of escaping its author, and in the wrong hands, as we've seen, philosophy becomes flame. Chapter 3. Hollywood and Hell. The dark entertainment connection. It's not unusual for art to flirt with darkness, but when that art crosses into ritual, and the lines blur between performance and belief, that's when the shadows start watching back. Hollywood has always danced with the devil. From Rosemary's Baby to The Omen. From black candles to crimson robes. Satanism became a visual language, a symbol of ultimate transgression, seductive power, and untouchable rebellion. But behind the camera, some believed it was more than just imagery. Anton LaVey in the spotlight. Anton LaVey understood performance in the 1960s as he built the Church of Satan in San Francisco. LaVey carefully cultivated his public image. He wore capes, carried a walking stick, kept a pet lion named Tagare, and transformed his home into the Black House, part temple, part stage. And Hollywood noticed. LaVey acted as a consultant on Rosemary's Baby, though uncredited. He later appeared in The Devil's Reign, 1975, a surreal cult horror film that featured real ritual elements from his own ceremonies. Some said he wrote parts of the script. Others believed he used the set as a true altar. Whether myth or fact, the rumors persisted. It wasn't just horror directors. LaVey allegedly held court with rising stars, musicians, and filmmakers fascinated by his philosophy and by the aura of danger he projected. Sammy Davis Jr., Jayne Mansfield, and even Kenneth Anger were said to have ties, loose or direct, with LaVey's inner circle. Some friendships were real, others were likely public stunts, but the image remained. The devil was on set. Jayne Mansfield and the curse of the devil's starlet. Perhaps no story blends celebrity, Satanism, and tragedy like that of Jayne Mansfield. Mansfield, a blonde bombshell and rising Hollywood icon in the late 1950s, was rumored to be a close friend, or even a high priestess, of LaVey's church. Photographs show the two together, laughing beside Baphomet, with LaVey wearing full regalia. Mansfield publicly denied deep involvement, but the tabloids ran wild. Then, in 1967, she died in a gruesome car crash. Her decapitation was quickly folded into the mythos. Some claimed she had been cursed. Others said LaVey had tried to warn her. One story suggested he had placed a hex on her boyfriend, Sam Brody, who died with her in the same accident. There is no proof of any curse, but the headlines bury the truth beneath a mountain of satanic imagery. Kenneth Anger, Magic in Motion. Filmmaker Kenneth Anger wasn't just interested in satanic aesthetics, he lived them. An open devotee of Aleister Crowley, Anger created occult-infused films like Invocation of My Demon Brother and Lucifer Rising. His sets were rituals, his actors vessels, his camera a wand. Anger was friendly with LaVey and deeply entrenched in the Hollywood underground. One of his collaborators, Bobby Beausoleil, would later become infamous as a member of the Manson family. Beausoleil murdered music teacher Gary Hinman, claiming spiritual revelation. He was also slated to star in Lucifer Rising. After the murder, Anger claimed Beausoleil had completed the ritual. Whether meant symbolically or literally, the comment added fuel to a growing fear that Satanism in Hollywood wasn't fiction. It was initiation. The Polanski Paradox Rosemary's Baby, 1968, is widely considered the film that redefined Satan in cinema. It was slow, grounded, and deeply disturbing. A domestic horror wrapped in paranoia and cultic manipulation. Its director, Roman Polanski, had cast his wife Sharon Tate in small roles and brought her onto the set often. 1 year later, she would be murdered, 8 months pregnant, by Charles Manson's followers. They believed they were acting on a prophecy. Some claimed Manson saw the film as symbolic. Others that Tate was targeted for her association with Hollywood's occult elite. LaVey was again rumored to be involved, as consultant, actor, or source of inspiration. Nothing was proven. But the intersection of film, Satanism, and real-world violence was now undeniable. The symbolism that lingers. Hollywood's use of satanic imagery grew exponentially in the decades that followed. But some argue it became more than aesthetic. Actors like Marilyn Manson, himself ordained in LaVey's church, blended performance with philosophy. His music videos, stage shows, and interviews used Satanism both as a marketing tool and a shield. Other artists flirted with it more subtly. Nicolas Cage, a collector of rare occult books, has appeared in multiple films featuring satanic overtones. The director of Hereditary claimed he wanted to make the occult mundane and matter-of-fact, not supernatural. Satan wasn't lurking anymore. He was part of the set design. Case study: the script that broke the actor. In 2009, a relatively unknown actor named Damon St. Clair was cast in an indie horror film loosely inspired by LaVeyan Satanism. The film never released, and few remember the name. But what happened during and after the production would become urban legend in film forums. St. Clair reportedly refused to break character for weeks. He altered the script, wrote his own rituals, and demanded real blood on set. Crew members claimed he began sleeping in the prop coffin, conducting candlelit readings from the Satanic Bible between takes. Then, 2 weeks after filming wrapped, he disappeared. When police finally located him, he was found living in an abandoned observatory outside Barstow, surrounded by sigils, bones, and a journal filled with his final invocations. No crime was committed, no violence occurred, but something had clearly broken. And it started with a script, a mirror or a portal. To blame Hollywood for real-world violence is simplistic, but to deny its influence is equally naive. Satanism, as a symbol, as a style, became cinematic currency. It meant taboo. It meant freedom. And for some, it meant permission. The camera never kills, but it can conjure. It can make symbols real. It can glamorize inversion, and it can give shape to ideas that would otherwise remain locked inside the mind of the unwell. Hollywood didn't summon the devil, but it gave him a good agent. Chapter 5. Beyond LaVey. Cults, spin-offs, and the descent into madness. The Superior Universal Alignment, Brazil's satanic child murders. Between 1989 and 1993, in the Brazilian city of Altamira, a wave of child abductions shocked the nation. The victims, all boys, were found mutilated, many castrated, others murdered and buried in shallow graves. The suspected mastermind was Valentina de Andrade, founder of a sect called Superior Universal Alignment, which fused apocalyptic prophecy, alien doctrine, and satanic themes. Her writings labeled children born after 1981 as without souls, destined for destruction. She denied involvement, but multiple members of her sect, including a doctor and several prominent townspeople, were implicated in the killings and sentenced. Her books were filled with satanic inversion, calling Lucifer the light bringer, and justifying the elimination of the impure. Andrade fled. Charges against her were eventually dropped due to lack of direct evidence, but the doctrine remained, and the graves were real. The Russian Gothic Satanists. Rituals in the forest. In 2008, in the Yaroslavl region of Russia, authorities uncovered one of the most gruesome murder scenes in modern history. A group of teenagers calling themselves Gothic Satanists lured 4 friends into the woods, stabbed them to death, dismembered their bodies, and allegedly cooked and ate parts of their remains. What they left behind was a makeshift altar, animal skulls, burned books, and inverted crosses. The leader, Nikolai Ogolobyak, was obsessed with satanic rock, death metal, and occult forums. He described the murders as a gift to the Dark Lord. None of them had any connection to the Church of Satan or structured ideology. They had built their belief system from horror, internet myths, and revenge fantasies, and they acted it out, frame by frame, when groups replace gods. What unites these cults isn't just ritual, it's identity reinforced through others. Sociologists refer to this as symbolic convergence. When isolated individuals bond over shared myth, even if the myth is artificial, over time they become immune to contradiction, immune to doubt. In many cases, cults that used satanic language did so as camouflage, not for Lucifer, but for their own desires. To dominate, to cleanse, to control. And in the echo chamber of their own ideology, they stop asking if it's real. They start asking who's next. The digital ritual modern cults no longer need a compound. They build their temples in chat rooms, forums, and encrypted servers. Groups like O9A now recruit through memes and PDF files. They disguise ideology as edgy content. And once someone downloads a manifesto or joins a Discord server, the indoctrination begins, not with theology, but with dehumanization. This is where Satanism becomes a brand, a shorthand, a secret language, and it spreads like smoke, unseen until it burns. The final inversion. Every cult in this chapter began with a choice: to reject what was sacred. Not just religion, but empathy, law, morality, life itself. To kill and call it cleansing. To torture and call it transformation. To believe in nothing and worship that emptiness. In these acts, Satanism becomes something else. Not a doctrine of self, but of destruction. And the line between belief and brutality disappears. But not all who use satanic symbols spill blood. Many never go beyond aesthetics. Some evolve. Others mutate. The question becomes, what happens when society itself begins to inherit the fear, the imagery, and the unresolved panic? What's left in the aftermath? Not in cults, but in culture. That's where we go next. Chapter 6. The Legacy of Darkness. A culture soaked in fear. The crimes left scars, the symbols left stains, but long after the blood was washed away, something else remained. Fear, a slow, crawling paranoia that spread not through violence, but through headlines, pulpits, and television screens. This wasn't just the legacy of murder, it was the legacy of myth. The media machine. In the 1980s and early 1990s, the Satanic Panic swept across America like a virus in the dark. Daycare owners were accused of hosting black masses. Therapists claimed to uncover repressed memories of ritual abuse. Talk shows paraded victims of satanic cults who swore they'd seen demons wearing human faces. Most of it was false, but it didn't matter. News programs ran fiery specials with inverted crosses and ominous soundtracks. Best-selling books sold horror as journalism. Politicians vowed to cleanse America of occult influence. Police were trained to spot ritual signs that had no basis in reality. In this fog, belief became weapon, and so did accusation. The McMartin case, fear is fire. No story captures the madness more clearly than the McMartin preschool trial. one of the longest and most expensive criminal trials in US history. Accusations began with a single mother who claimed her child had been abused. Soon, over 300 children were interviewed, many with suggestive leading questions. The results? Tales of underground tunnels, ritual murder, flying witches, and blood-drinking ceremonies. There was no physical evidence, no bodies, no tunnels, no witnesses outside the children. But the charges stuck. For years, lives were destroyed, and even when the accused were acquitted, the public remained suspicious, because the idea of a satanic cult harming children was too horrifying and too sensational to let go. Pop culture joins the choir. In response, or maybe in reflection, pop culture adopted Satanism as both villain and brand. Films like The Exorcist, The Omen, Prince of Darkness, and Hellraiser embedded satanic imagery deep into cinematic language. In music, bands like Black Sabbath, Slayer, and Merciful Fate wore the Baphomet with pride. Lyrics referenced sacrifice, blood, and infernal power. For some, it was theater. For others, initiation. The line between rebellion and worship was intentionally blurred. The more society feared the symbols, the more youth embraced them as armor, as identity, as a way to say, "You don't own me." Fashion and the new faith. Eventually, satanic aesthetics detached from belief entirely. High fashion brands used inverted crosses, runway models walked in goat head masks. Mainstream artists, from Lil Nas X to Billie Eilish, incorporated dark religious themes, not as doctrine, but as drama. Satan became marketable, clothing lines with pentagrams, jewelry with sigils, TikTok tutorials on casting hexes. It was no longer about evil, it was about style. A dark mirror held up to the panic that once ruled a generation: digital rituals and online cults. In the digital age, Satanism exists in memes, forums, and usernames. Some treat it as real religion, others as satire. But in the shadows of the internet, new forms of belief began to grow. Aesthetics-only cults that recruit through visuals, viral ritual videos that blend horror with mystery, ARGS, alternate reality games that blur fiction and fact. One Discord server claimed to perform nightly demon meditations while live streaming. Another, now banned, encouraged participants to draw blood sigils and post them anonymously. Were they real? Not entirely, but real enough to frighten, and sometimes real enough to inspire violence. Moral reactions in the 2020s. Today, the panic looks different. The Church of Satan has faded from the front page, replaced by hashtags and controversy. Yet, satanic fear still appears. In school board debates, in conspiracy theories, in Hollywood boycotts. Every time a celebrity wears red or a music video features flames, someone accuses them of being part of the cult. We've traded courtroom trials for comment wars, but the hysteria never left. It simply evolved. Belief by design. Sociologists studying Satanic Panic and its aftershocks point to a simple truth. We need villains. Not just people, but ideas we can't control. Satanism, whether theatrical or real, became the perfect villain. It was mysterious. It rejected morality. It mirrored our fears back at us. And so we gave it power. And then we punished it for using it. What the symbols mean. Now today, when someone wears a pentagram, it could mean 100 things. Personal empowerment, rebellion against dogma, artistic expression, or nothing at all. The symbols have been divorced from blood, but the legacy of fear and fascination still lingers. Somewhere, someone sees it and thinks of a ritual in the woods. Somewhere else, someone sees it and feels seen. That's the strange afterlife of the panic. A culture soaked in fear. But
we search for monsters in the woods, in the symbols, in the eyes of those who walk among us. But the deeper truth is colder. The monster was never hidden. It was in plain sight, in ideas left unchecked, in beliefs worn like masks, in symbols that gave permission, not power, and in every lie that felt more comfortable than truth. Satanism gave the world an enemy it could understand, a name for the noise, a shape to the chaos. Until next time, mortals.